I'm good to go.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yes, yes, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are away. We are up and away. Welcome to the party. My name is Kyle Meyr. If you don't know who I am, welcome. I am a photographer, a car photographer specifically. On Monday, I had the awesome chance to shoot with Sony's new A1. That is right. Yes, it is here. Oh, you can hear me now. All right, cool. Let me turn that off. Perfect. A little bit of a delay, getting used to it. I'm in the chat. If you are in the chat, drop a line. I will hear it. But check it out. The Sony A1. That is right. Sony's latest and greatest, the monster, the 50 megapixel monster. This thing is beast. And I'm going to show you why here in a second. We took it to a Porsche dealership here in Norway. One we're really good friends with, Porsche Center, Oscar and Bottom. Good people. And we shot a brand new Porsche 911 992 Heritage Edition. If you're into cars, you know what that is. And I'm going to show you the final photo here in 1 second. I promise you. It's sick. If you were there, you saw the whole process. It was monstrous. It took time. But we made it happen. I'm super proud of us. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, before I show you the photo and before I walk you through some of the steps, if you are watching this live, jump into the chat. I am in the chat. I am reading everything you say. I promise I will read it out loud to a certain extent. You can't fool me. And I will respond to it. If you have questions, I will answer them in real time. We will not be waiting until the end of the stream. I will be answering them as they come in. So, without further ado, allow me to show you the final photo. There it is. So, I'm going to try to recreate this photo with all of the photos that we took on Monday. It's not going to be easy, but that's why we're here. It might not be exactly this photo. It might not be perfectly accurate, but I'm going to give you the general gist of the techniques, and hopefully we can try to recreate this so that you guys understand how to turn your car photos into a much cleaner example of your efforts, because you guys are good. I know you guys are good. I know you're talented. So we just need to hone in on those skills and try to flex a little bit. So, speaking of which, let's start. Let's take a look. Just want to make sure you're looking at the right thing. That is correct. Let's start with the first plate. The first plate. I'll call them plates. They're layers, basically. We're taking all these layers and we're going to mash them into one. And that one final photo is going to sort of show all these layers put together into hopefully a pretty natural combination of the photos. The first one was the ambient light. When you're shooting car photography, once again, if you weren't there on Monday, when you're shooting car photography, it's best to think one light at a time. When you think one light at a time, you have much more control over the final image and you can sort of follow a recipe better, right? When you're cooking some food, you're making some pasta, you don't just measure all the ingredients at the same time in the same bowl. You do it one at a time and then you mix it at the end. So here's the first one. The first light, if you will, is the ambient light. Just around the whole place. A lot of cool lights, a lot of really cool lights. It creates a lot of mess on the car, so we want to clean that up. That's kind of the goal of the photo. But a lot of cool lights, looks really good. A little bit of dark spots. This photo, as it is, could be edited into something really clean. Something really cool. Really cool. So just that photo, we shot about 1/3 of a second on a tripod and 35 millimeters on this setup right here. This A1 with the 16-35 f2.8. If you're shooting Sony, highly recommend you shoot native lenses. Always faster, always sharper, always better. Promise you, worth it. So then after this, we started to focus on very specific parts of the car and lighting each individual part. And the first part that I think is always the easiest to focus on is the shoulders of the car. So we started to think in terms of how would this shoulder be best lit up, and this with one light at a time. So the first light we're going to focus on in this one. One thing we did was to set up curtains to block out all the reflections from the paint. Cars are very shiny. If you look at the paint here, you get a lot of reflections from the floor, a lot from the skylights. We wanted to get rid of that. So we got rid of it and added our own light, this one. Car has very metallic paint, really shiny. So once the light hits the car, it bounces around a bit in there. There's a lot of depth. It looks really pretty. And then we just moved the light around a little bit. Got some extra plates, shot here, removed some of the reflections that were already, if you see here, some of the reflections that were already polluting the car a bit. And then we moved up here to shoot the front. And then we bounced around, got some extra stuff on the front of the car. Now, the car is a little bit dusty. That's why it looks a little bit hazy. That's why the color loses a bit of its luster here. We're backlighting dust on the car, and that creates a bit of haze. We could have cleaned it, but it's not my car, and it's very expensive, and the paint is just perfect as it is. So I didn't want to risk touching it. Didn't want to take a cloth to it, especially dry. Easier just to avoid it. So then we started to think in terms of the front end here. So we are at 3 lights now. We have this light, the backlight for the front that gives a little bit of a shadow here on the edges and in here. And then we have 1 light here off screen that's lighting up the lip. That was the idea. Another light moved around to light up this part of the lip. And then we just continued. And then the final photo was with the headlights on. That was the goal. So now we have all these photos. All these photos. I apologize ahead of time. Lightroom is not up to date. So it cannot read the raw files from the Sony A1. So I've converted them all into TIFF, and we are working with TIFF files instead of the raw files. But that's as good as we're going to get right now. So let's start working towards making this photo, this final photo. We're going to start by taking all of the individual plates, highlighting them all, selecting them all, and then right-clicking, sorry. I get my right and left mixed up. It happens. And then edit. We want to open them into Photoshop, so we're going to be able to play with them, but we want to open them as layers. So when you click open as layers, it will open Photoshop. And then, if you give me 1 second, there it is. Now we have all of them open. I'm going to spare you guys having to wait for my slow computer. By the way, in the meantime, once again, welcome to the live stream. My name is Kyle Meyr. If you are watching this live stream, join the chat. I am in the chat, and I am reading everything you post, and I will answer every question you have. Don't be afraid to ask. I will answer it. There are no bad questions. So, moving on. Now we have all of these plates. We want to rearrange them into something that makes sense. I'm going to start by unhighlighting them and then highlighting them one at a time to see what they are. So this bottom plate right now is the headlights. I know already that the headlights have to be the last thing that I work with. So I'm going to put it up at the top and forget about it. A good bottom plate, I think, is something that has like your strongest feature. And then you start to add on top of that. That's what I like. And I think the strongest feature is maybe this one, actually. Because it shows the whole car. You have a good understanding of the light. That's pretty nice lit front end. So we just sort of get familiar with the layers. That's the idea. And we'll start with this. So now we're going to go through, and one at a time, we're going to recognize what each layer has to offer the layer below it. So what do the layers below the layer that we're working on need to be added to them? And with this one, what we're seeing is not much of a change, but what I think it adds to it is this bottom lip is really clean. So I want to add that in. I want to add that. So what I'm going to do is lighten the layer, because that'll let the light from the bottom layer come through. And if you see, now it only lets in basically what we've added in terms of lights. But it adds a bit too much, right? You get this. I don't want this in the final photo. So I'm going to hold Alt on this layer and click the mask. And what the mask is going to do is going to put on a black mask. And if you do a white brush onto that black mask, it's going to bring back in whatever it was you wanted to keep. Once again, this is what I want it to be lit up. So I'm just going to brush it back in. I'm going to change the opacity back to 100. Brush it back in because I think that looks good. Also, if you want it to look natural, it's nice to have a little bit of some of the reflections in the paint. Doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's a good place for that. So I wouldn't do much more. And then we go to the next one and we work from there. And we sort of work in that same vein. We have a question. Sebastian says, slow day at work today. Perfect timing with the stream. Yes, Sebastian, I'm happy you're here, man. Thank you for joining. I'm pumped you're here. Slow days are the worst, aren't they? So this layer, I like that this layer adds, actually there's not much it does add, does it? I think we are, let's try to lighten it just so we can focus on, and I'm not so sure it gives us much more than what we have already. Maybe the interior gets a bit more lit up. So let's do that. Let's save this for the interior. Once again, we'll mask it. Let's go with that. Although it is a bit much. You know what? I don't think we need that. I'm going to delete it. It's good to shoot more than you need. So this layer focuses on, we have a lot more focus on the front end here, but we've already lit that up pretty well. And then we have, you know what? I'm wondering if this bottom layer was already perfect. I wonder if this bottom layer is already something that I've edited. In which case, that's an oopsie from my end. So let's just get rid of this bottom layer because that's already doing something that we don't want. So you guys just got a little sneak peek into the final product. That's dangerous. So now we start to do this again. We will go lighten. And then we'll mask it. And I think what I want from this is this front end. Let's get that white brush out here. Oops. I'm just brushing right on the car. There we go. But I don't think I like that bottom layer that we have. I'm going to do this as the bottom layer instead. I'm going to lift this to here and get it out of the way. There we go. That's a much better layer to start with. So what we want is the front of the car from this photo because I like that best. So we're just going to keep stacking. Keep stacking. And we're only looking at the car. Brian says, class is in session. Thank you for joining, Brian. I'm happy to have you here, man. Happy to have you here. So, next layer. What do we want from this layer? I like the light that it adds here. I think it cleans this up quite a lot. So, let's lighten this. And let's brush it back in here. The rims, I think we'll get a better version of later. This photo, I think, adds quite a lot to this back end. And here on the sides. So let's lighten this thing. It is already lightened. That is a good start. But one thing I don't like that it does is that it adds so much mess here. So let's get rid of some of that. But let's be a little bit picky. Let's start zooming in. I'm going to make this smaller. Once again, everything was shot on a tripod, so it should be pretty even. Should be pretty aligned. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. And we'll deal with those lines later when we get there. Now we have a big problem here. I'm going to mask this out. And the reason why I didn't go with the opposite mask for this is if I disable opposite mask. Well, let's try it. Let's try just for the sake of consistency. And let's just brush back in what we want. That's probably smarter anyway. We like the shoulders already. I think they're good already. We just want more detail on the rims and more detail here on the logo and the paint on the side. I think that's as far as I'm willing to push that. Looks okay to me. I'm going to mask this out again just because we don't need that. It's too messy. And then I don't want any extra light on this, so I'm going to mask that out. So we're doing okay. Let's just brush this and see what happens. No, that's where we started running into problems. So now we have down here. You see, I like this light here on the side a little bit better than what we have before. So I'm going to keep this maybe not on lighten, because if we go lighten, then we get some of these lines in again. I'm going to go back to normal, and then I'm going to just brush it back in here. Still the same technique. Just trying to keep it a bit focused. So here's the problem. Now we start to get to the point where if we brush back into the back, we get a bit dark. So I'm going to hit X and just fade it back in with the rest of the photo. That's an okay balance, okay place to be. This is not too big of a blemish that we can't erase afterwards with a patch tool. And then the final one is the headlights. Since the headlight photo is so dark already, it's pretty easy. You just lighten, hit it with that inverted mask, and then brush them back in with the white brush. So there we go. Now we've got some headlights on. Looking pretty good. There we go. The running lights down here, the fog lights. And then that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. If anything, I think it's a bit dark around here. Let's see if we have a plate for that. Did we shoot anything? I have a feeling we might have. I just need to find it. That's the one we're using. That's a bit brighter. Let's use this. So I'm going to open this into Photoshop. And then I'm going to highlight all and just add it as a layer. Copy. I'm going to paste it. Let's add as a layer. Let's lighten it. And then once again, inverted mask, white brush. And I liked this part. So we're just going to bring that back in. There we go. Now we got a little bit more detail on the front, on the splitter in the front. It's a little bit splotchy. It's not our best work. This is something I know we can do better, but for now it serves our purpose. It's splotchy mostly because the lighting was just bare bulbed. And when it's bare bulbed, it aims just basically at one part at a time. So I'm happy with the rims. I think they're lit pretty well. We do have separate plates for that if we really want to get in there, but I don't think we need them. All around, I'm pretty happy with where it's at. So you can go in and start cleaning up the paint now, which is something that needs to be done because there's a lot of distractions in the paint. A lot of lights that don't need to be there, like here, reflections. I think the easiest way to do that is once you find, it's irreversible, unfortunately, but the easiest way is also usually the most risky, is I will combine all the layers into one, holding Shift, Alt, Command, and E. I'm on a Mac, by the way. So now we have every layer built into this one layer. And then I'll start working on it from there. Otherwise, you have to go in and start finding exactly which layers. So for example, to get rid of these blemishes, I gotta go into the patch tool by hitting J, highlight them, get rid of it. But since it's on lighten, the same blemish, of course, since we shot it on a tripod, is going to be in the photo below it. So then we got to go to each individual photo and work our way down, which is just, it takes too much time. And for the sake of our purposes, we'll do it like this. We'll combine all the photos into one, and then comes the painstaking process of going in and getting rid of all the little distractions in the photo. You can go pretty big with this usually without getting too much of a loss. The paint ends up getting a bit faded in some areas if you get a bit lazy. And then basically what you're doing is just going through and cleaning things up. But I could spend hours doing that. You guys don't want to see that. You want to see the big picture. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on because just like a cooking show, I already have one waiting for us here. So next step is to remove the car from the photo because we want this picture of the car, but we don't want this picture of the background. We want to combine a better picture of the background with the car. So the pen tool. If you don't know the pen tool, get used to it. Press P, choose Curvature Pen. I like Curvature Pen. I guess you can do whatever you want, but Curvature Pen tends to follow the lines of the car a little bit better. And you just come through, pick a spot to start, and you start picking points on the car. And with a Curvature Pen, when you move it, the flex of the line the pen drives or draws will outline the car. And then you just go through and do the whole car. And then when you get back around to the beginning, say this is a weirdly shaped car, click the circle, that will link up everything. So now your pen tool has been linked up around assumedly the whole car. You should do the whole car, not just this little piece. I'm just doing this to show you. And you click selection, and then you make your selection. If you feather it at all, you'll probably see that in the final photo. I feather by just 1 pixel just in case there's some weird, whatever. Click OK. So now we have the selection. If you hit Command J, it will separate whatever you just selected. So then unhighlight all the other layers, and now we have just this. The idea is it's the car and not just that. And funny enough, I'm going to highlight all these again. It's probably a quicker way to do that, but I'm kind of an idiot when it comes to Photoshop. I have already done that for you. So Command E, open the original. I haven't made any Lightroom adjustments. I don't know what that would look like. Take a second to open. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching the stream, get into the chat. Come say hi. Tell me about what's going on in your life. How's work? How's your photography going? What have you shot lately? What are you editing? So here, I'm going to get rid of this plate. We don't need it anymore. Now we have a cutout version of the car. And not only have we cut out the car, we've gone in and brushed out the window because we want it to be natural, right? We want the background to come through where the background's supposed to show. And we've brushed out this back window too, but not too much because the back window's tinted. And if you brush it out 100%, you end up getting an untinted version of the photo. Now we need a background. So we can find our background. And I like this one as the background. I think this is clean. I think it looks good. I think it looks pretty. So this is a technique, that pen tool. All of this you can use if you want to add motion to the car later. Now you have a car. You can put the road underneath it. You can put whatever background you want underneath it and then add movement to the car later. But we don't want movement. It's in a garage. It's not driving anywhere. So one thing I'm noticing is that the white balances are a bit off from when we shot with lights to where we are now. This is something you can fix. One thing I do want to fix because it's my style is I don't like the greens. I don't like the yellows. I want it to be clean. So I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. If I was any more responsible, I would take it in the Photoshop and use the camera raw. And camera raw filter would be a better option at looking at both the photos at the same time, looking at the layer of the car, looking at the background layer, just making sure they're even. But I'm going to take a risk. I want it to be clean. I want it to be white. I don't want any green. So we're going to take our green layer and just play with it and make sure we're okay with getting rid of it. Aqua. Once again, I don't want that. You see that color in the windows? I don't like it. I want it to be flat. I want it to be white and clean and sharp. Yellow. There's a bit of yellow maybe in the ground here in the dirt. I'm going to drop that as well. Yeah, so you start to see it in the lights over here. You see it underneath the car. It's going to drop that. And the orange as well. Can drop that a little bit. So now we have an okay place to start. I'm going to do a little bit of color correction. Well, nah, you know what? We'll leave it there. We'll leave it there and we'll correct it later. So Command E will open it in Photoshop. And while we're waiting for that, let's just hang out, enjoy some beats. Oh, wow, that was fast. There we go. So now we have two photos, basically, and we want to combine the two to make one photo. That's the goal, right? We thought in terms of the background on its own, in which we didn't add any light. We used only the ambient light when we were shooting, the light on the ceiling, the light around, and then we shot the car, basically. And to shoot the car, we took a bunch of different plates. I keep calling them layers, whatever, a bunch of different photos that we combined together to make one clean shot of the car where it looks like the whole thing was lit simultaneously. And that's where we have that. So select all. And then, oops. Well, actually, what we can do is, and I've already done it, we can take the background photo, select all, copy, and then put the background in and slide it just underneath there. A little bit of a difference. I can get rid of this because that's me showing you the feature. So there we go. Now, this is the car without anything. And then this is the car on the background. It looks a bit unnatural. That's a bit of a problem. We cannot have the car be a different white balance. We cannot have the backgrounds be flatter. Everything has to look like it was shot at once. That is the goal, is to blend everything into one. That's why I didn't eliminate all the lights on the side, all the lights up here, all this white reflection down here at the bottom. That's why I kept it, is because I wanted it to look like it was shot in the, not in the studio and then copy paste it in, but actually in the environment that it's in. So now we need to blend everything back in. Blend everything into each other, I mean. Tommy says, got a bit late to the party, but I'm here now, a little bit behind you. It looks good. Tommy, happy to have you here, man. You've been here for the whole ride. You've been here for the whole ride. I'm happy to have you here. Thank you for joining. There's a lot of steps to this. A lot of steps, but this is where we are now. We have two photos, basically. We have one layer, which is just the car, and one layer, which is just the background. So, I want to play with the color balance. So, I'm going to actually, let's group that and leave that out for a second. I'm going to start from scratch. So, I think the color balance is too warm on the car. I don't think it matches the background. So I'm going to go into adjustments, color balance. And now if I adjust this, it's going to hit the whole photo. I only want it to hit the car. So I'm going to hold Alt, click on it, and that's going to give you this arrow, and that's going to lock it to the car. So now whatever I do, only going to affect the car. And we only want to make small movements here. If you make big movements, you're going to get lost in it. So I'm going to cool down the car a bit to match the lighting in the rest of the room. I'm going to take a little bit out of the reds. Just a little bit, not much. And we look at before and after. It's not a big difference, but it blends a little bit better I'm going to go a little bit further here. What does it look like if I hit it with some greens? It's too much. It's just going to flatten it out and it's going to look a little goofy. So I'm going to bring that back to 0. Before, after. It blends a little bit better. It's a little bit colder. This is good. Just going to remind myself what to do next. There we go. There is still blue in the rims, and I want to get rid of that. I don't want any blue on the car because the car is not meant to be blue. The rims aren't blue. They don't sell you blue rimmed car. So I'm going to take the hue and saturation, tuck it right under there, and once again, lock that into this layer. You hold Alt, click on the layer, lock it in. I'm going to go to the blues and take all the blues out. You see the difference? The wheels aren't meant to be blue, so why should they be? I also think that a lot of the warmth from the car layer comes from the interior. The interior, I don't think, is actually that warm in person, so I'm going to go into the yellows and drop those a bit too and watch the interior. See how that reacts? I'm going to take that out. Now, it does affect the emblem a bit and the emblem in the wheels. That's something we'll just have to bring back later, but that should be addressed. So we're starting to look pretty good. We're starting to look pretty good. What was my next step? I feel pretty confident about where we are. So now that the car is relatively blended into the photo, the colors at least match. We're at an okay place. I think I'm pretty happy with it. This is usually the time where I would get up and walk away for about 5 or 10 minutes, do something else, and then come back and look at it and make sure I'm looking at a good final product. But we don't have that luxury now. Let's play with the magentas and see what happens. Yeah, there's a lot of purple down here. That should be red. So let's adjust that, make it a bit warmer. Okay. That's as much as I'll play with that. Cool. So we have a car on a background. Now I want to sort of edit them both together. I want to add some stuff that I think brings the whole photo together and tells the story a bit better. Some of the things are the direction of the lights. I think the car is lit a little bit more specifically than what the overhead lighting in the studio and the workshop provides. There's a lot more light coming from this angle than on the car than there is in the real photo. That's something maybe I'll do in Lightroom later. But for now, I want to sort of give a bit direction to the lights above. For that, I'm going to put a new layer. Toss underneath group 2, which is just here to remind, I'm going to throw group 2 down here. Group 2, ignore it. It doesn't exist. That's what I've done earlier. So I'm going to brush. I'm going to take a sample of a color from just around here. And there is a little bit of blue in it. So I'm just going to use that color basically, but a lighter version of it. And I'm going to paint in a bit of a glow on the lights up top. Not much. Just going to use the brush tool. Brush them up. Try to skip over, oops. Try to skip over the things they shouldn't really be hitting. Don't have to do all of them. Just want a little bit. And then since this one's further away, slightly smaller version. And this. And there we go. I think I've hit as much as I want to hit. I'm going to go to screen. There's a bit of glow. It's too much. So I'm going to start with 0. And I'm going to work up from there. Because then you can really tell where the mess is coming from. They lose a bit of their color. So I might create another layer and soft light blend it just to get that color back. And that ends up making it a little bit too bright. So you know what? I'm going to get rid of that. But one thing I do want to do is, whoops, I'm going to get rid of that dock. You don't need to be seeing that. I like the photo on a whole. I think it's cool. I kind of want to make the photo a bit colder just because it's my style. So I'm going to go and take my blue steel one of my favorite colors that I've invented. I'm going to claim that. I'm just going to paint the whole photo. And then I'm going to soft light blend it back in. And then I'll start from 0 once again and work my way in. And I think what this does is it sort of connects the background with the car, in that now they both have the same kind of color layering on them. So we're getting there. We're in a good place. We're looking pretty good. If there's anything I want to do here, it's to clean up the ground a bit, get rid of little things like this rock. Doesn't need to be there. And you can go around and do this for hours. I don't like this great. It's not that great. You're welcome for the pun. This gets a bit more tricky, but let's do that. And then we'll use the stone clamp. Stone clamp? Clone stamp. Oh my God, that's what it was. I'm running out of English already. Already, who would have thought? And I'm not at opacity 100, of course. So then I'm just going to start brushing in things that I know fit better. There we go. Take the same thing here. Now the lines aren't really going to line up perfectly, which is just a risk you end up taking. But at least it gets rid of the distraction. And there we go. Cool. So that's okay. We're at an okay place. I'm going to hit Command and S, and that's going to save it, and it's going to take us right back into Lightroom. If you think the car ended up getting a bit too blue, you can go in and just sort of mask it out. You hit that mask button. Like the rims, once again, they're not blue, so why should they be? There we go. And then if you like the paint warmer, you just go in and brush the whole thing out. But I'm okay with where it is. I think it darkens the car a bit, if anything. But that's about it. I'm okay with where it is. So 98%, we're getting there. Take my first sip of water of the stream. It's like peeing when you're drunk. You take your first pee when you're drunk. You open the floodgates. It's all downhill from there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. If you're not in the chat, get in the chat. Let me know what's going on with your day. I'm reading everything in the chat. I want to talk with you. I don't want to talk at you. I want to hear what's going on in your life. I want to hear some tips, some tricks. Maybe you're learning something, maybe you're not. One thing we could do is play with the dodge and burn tool and try to blend, make some of these shadows make a bit more sense. We are in dodge. We should be in burn. I'm going to go into 25% in the midtones and bring these tires back to darker because I don't think they tuck in as well as they should. This is the biggest point. If, when you're photoshopping a subject into a different background, if the point at which they meet, the tires, for example, meet the floor, doesn't make sense, then the whole photo is going to look like it's floating. It's going to not look perfect. So, Command S, we'll save that again. We'll take another drink of water. I'm not going to do it too much. I don't want to bore you guys with it. I'm happy you guys are here. Jump in the chat. Let me hear what's going on. Let me hear what's going on in your life. Let me know who was here when we were shooting this photo on Monday. Who was here for that? Which one of you guys? Awesome Keta says, damn, this is looking good, man. Thank you very much, man. Awesome. I want a name like Awesome. That's pretty cool. Kristen says, learning a lot. Never worked with layers before. Thumbs up. It is terrifying, Kristen. It's so scary at first working with layers because so much can go wrong. And when you open Photoshop for like the first few times, it just gives you this blank stare. And it's hard to know which way to go from there. I'm still at the point where I'm just bouncing around and doing random things and hoping it turns out okay. But it seems like it's working. So I'm going to stick with it. We're at 98%. Henrik says, hey, Kyle. Henrik, always around. Thank you very much for joining, man. Thank you very much. I'm happy to have you here. So we've saved it. It's in here somewhere. I think it's... Where is it? It is this one, correct? That looks correct. Yes. Cool. So we have the photo now. Back in Lightroom. Yannicka says, I joined Monday. Yes. I'm happy. I'm happy you stayed. You joined Monday and you stayed for today. I'm pumped about that. I'm happy to hear it. So now we can add the final touches. Now we can almost edit as if it's one photo. I do want to add a bit more. Once again, like I said, there's a lot more light here than the rest of the car. So I want to give a bit of direction to the light there. For that, I'm just going to add a radial gradient. A radial filter. Bump it up. Henrik, always a pleasure. Thank you, Henrik. Stoked you're here. You make the world go round, Henrik. I'm just going to add it from this side and punch it in. But since the car is already lit up pretty well, I want to brush out the car from that. I don't want to affect what we've done already on the paint there. So I'm just going to use mask or leave it on auto mask. There we go, right here. And hopefully it's smart enough that I can just wildly throw the brush around, and we can check our work by hovering over this, and we look okay. Looks okay. I'm also going to add some warmth from that. No, I'm going to leave it alone. So that's pretty good. I also don't like that it's lighting up the bottom of this car. I think it's too distracting. This 992 Carrera 4S up here at the top. I'm going to darken that. Okay, so before, after. This is where we are now. Pretty good place to be. I'm pretty happy with it. Let's add a bit of... I'm going to darken the background a bit, just so it pushes your eyes towards the subject a bit more. This is like vignetting, but without vignetting. That's pretty decent. Bring the whites up to save the lights. Just use the darks. There we go. And then once again, I'm going to erase the car. Yannicka says, you know you've been working loads in Adobe Creative when you start Control Plus in YouTube to zoom in and zoom out. I don't know what that actually does in YouTube. I hope that didn't break the stream for you. I hope you're still here. It sounds like you are. Yeah. When I zoom in Photoshop, I typically just hold Alt and then use the scroll on the mouse. That works pretty well. It gives you maybe not as much control though. So that's pretty good. And I'm also going to create like a spotlight around the car by adding a darker gradient from the bottom. I'm just going to follow the line of the car with a gradient, just at an angle right there. I'm not going to do too much more. I'm going to leave it pretty simple. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Add a bit of a vignette, not much. I just want enough that it sort of hones the viewer's eye into the center of the photo. Now we can play with the red because the car is primarily red. We can add a bit more pop just to get it to stand out a bit. Awesome Caddis says, how long have you been shooting cars? How long have I been shooting cars? That's a good question. Maybe years. I've been shooting professionally for 7 years now, and cars have always been like in and around that. I used to shoot cars more for fun. Now I shoot them for fun and for money, which is nice. It's always nice. The blues, I think this blue is a little bit too distracting, but remember the whole photo is kind of blue. So if we play with it too much, you're going to lose it. I'm not going to do too much. The smartest thing would be to brush it so it's a little less distracting. But you know what? I might keep it there. let's see. So if I give that 3 stars, let's compare it to what I edited earlier. Ooh, completely different direction. This is the way I had edited earlier. So I edited yesterday, so I would sort of have a different idea of, or a better idea of how to edit for you guys so I could be a little faster. This is what I edited yesterday, and this is what I edited today. Wow, very different. One thing I can see already is that I brightened up these shadows a bit, and I will do that before we call this finished. Not too much, just enough so that the car is a little bit more even. And let's call it there. Cool, so we have more photos. But this is the grand overall, the big shot, if you will, the hero. There. So we went from, allow me to take you on a little trip through time with the original photo, the first one I took yesterday, or not yesterday, on Monday. This is the original photo. Ooh, my microphone is mad at me. And now we are here. Big difference. Big difference. A dramatic difference. A lot more poppy. A lot more focus on the car. A lot less mess on the car. Now, that was something that I did in, what, like 30, 40 minutes? You can do it slower. You can do it faster. If you do it slower, you'll get more out of it. If you do it faster, you'll save yourself a lot of time. Now we're going to start working on the detail shots. Not only did we shoot the one big photo, we got a bunch of small details because this car is very unique. It has gold lettering. It has a bunch of really cool badging. I really like the car. I think it's very pretty. It changed my life. Now I need the car. I like this photo. Let's start with this. The white balance is good. It's pretty accurate. I think it was shot at daylight, and my light that I used on this was daylight as well. This is one light, if I remember correctly. I had one light on a strip box, 182 millimeter long strip box by 30, and I had it up over the car in the back, so it was backlighting everything. I did that so I could get these ridges to shine a little bit better. Yannicka says, awesome result. Thank you very much, Yannicka. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That took some work. So let's start with this. I'm going to try balancing out the white balance, but I think it's okay. Yeah. So my light hit the car, but it did not hit the floor behind it, and it did not hit the lights above it. So the lights above it that are reflected in the car are a bit of a mess. But if we take the yellow badge, or if we take the yellow down to get rid of it, it's going to hit the heritage badge as well. And I'll show that here. So you see the light in the paint up here. If I bump up the saturation, it gets brighter. Same up here. I don't want those yellow. I want it to be normal. Henrik Dalla says this Heritage 911 looks incredible in that candy red metallic. I am fairly certain it is called cherry metallic. It is a beautiful color. It is so deep. Look at the richness. Look at the flakes. So beautiful. Speaking of which, this has lost its color, so I'm going to brush it back in. I'm just going to bump the saturation, add a bit of yellow. And hopefully auto mask will do its job. If it can't, then we'll find another way. I'm just going to slowly brush everything back so that it's more the color it used to be. So there we go. Pretty good. I'm okay with it. It was just the heritage badge that was yellow, if I remember correctly. And I do. So now we can work with some of the details. Now that I've done some of the OCD color correction. I'm going to bring it a bit brighter, but I think the highlights end up coming too much with it. Shadows I'm going to bring up a bit just so you can get some of these vents down here. I kind of like that. If you really want the paint to jump, you can bump up the clarity, but then you get some of the dust that's on the car. Amateur move, not cleaning the car. But once again, it's not my car and it's a 3 million kroner car. So I'm not going to take the risk of brushing it off. I want it to pop. So I'm going to add a bit of dehaze. That's a good way of getting contrast if you don't want to play with the contrast. The dehaze. But then again, I'm okay with the contrast. There's a lot we could do to this photo. But I think the lesson to be learned here is to restrain yourself from doing too much. The color is already pretty rich. I'm going to bump it up. What would it look like purple? Whoa. The paint is also pretty orange. So you see how it reacts when we take away and add some of the orange. If you're going to play with one, for example, if you're playing with the color of blue in a sky, sky is typically not always like all the way blue. There's probably some aqua and some purple. It's smart to play with the colors that are near it as well, just so you don't end up losing like information and things get all weird and goofy. And then there we go. I want the focus to be on the center of the photo, so I'm going to add vignetting. And I'm going to feather it and drop that midpoint, before and after. So before and after. You know what? The vignetting is too much. It's too much. So what I'm going to do instead is add a gradient to here and to here. Now, if I had more time, I would get rid of this light in Photoshop, and I will later. So I'll mark that as 2 for now, and I'll copy and paste that preset onto some of the other photos. Just see if that works. Looks okay. What I do want to do is get rid of the color in the floor. I don't like it because it's going crazy. And to do that, I'm just going to brush it. And hopefully the auto mask does its thing. Annette Skutovic says, do you use stock photos or your own for background? Or do you prefer to shoot the car on a specific location? I'm not much of a Photoshop artist. I don't like spending too much time in Photoshop. I think it kills the mind. I think it kills creativity if you're not into it. It's like doing paperwork as a cop, right? Like, I don't want to do the paperwork. I want to go out and bust criminals and kick ass. So I prefer to shoot on location. Very much so. I prefer to have time with the car. I prefer to get to know the car. I prefer to be on location. I would also, so to get the most out of the paint, we shot bare bulbs onto the car. That's where you get all these like sprinkles, these little shiny bits. To fix that in, well, the problem is when you do that, you end up getting the reflection of the light, typically in some place, because cars are very reflective. So to fix that, we'll go over to Light or Photoshop. It takes 2 seconds because my computer is slow. Just give it time. There we go. And it's very easy. We'll just go in and either use the stone clamp. Oh my God, the clone stamp tool. That's the second time today. And take a sample of somewhere near it. The problem is the focus is kind of important here. It should remain in focus. So let's just try this. We'll use the patch tool. You hit J, take a sample near it. And at least that gets rid of the harshness of the light. And then we just sort of clone stamp it back. And you just go like inch by inch and make sure you're following the same gradients. Make sure it makes sense. And then you just bring it back. I'm not going to get it perfect because I don't have the time, but that's a pretty good place to start. When you're shooting cars like this, it helps to backlight them. You end up getting quite a lot more richness out of the paint. You end up getting quite a lot more of like a clean and elegant look because you start to line and like you get the Porsche logo to pop a bit more. When you light for this, for example, I was lighting at about 45 degrees. So I was looking at the lights going into the car this way, and the car was looking at the light going this way. So that's the idea. And when you don't light directly, you end up getting a little bit more curve out of the lighting, which just makes the car look better. And then we have the logo here on the side, and we have the badge here on the front. Let's try this side logo. This one or this one. Let's do this. And let's try to bring the gauges back. So we took 2 photos. This will be the final one that I added. We took 2 photos, one of the interior nicely lit, and then one that's properly exposed for the gauges. They are completely different color balances. Very different. So I'm going to compensate for that. And I'm going to combine them now by hitting Command, oops, open as layers. We'll right click, edit in Photoshop, open as layers. Now they'll edit in Photoshop. What's up, guys? By the way, I'm still reading the chat. I'm still in the chat. If you got anything for me, let me know. Let me know what's going on in your life. Now, these 2 photos, I think, are slightly off-centered. They're just slightly moved. I did shoot on a tripod, but when I put my finger, I might have moved the photo. So highlight both of them. And we'll go to Edit and Auto Align Layers. I'll just use Auto. And now Photoshop will read both the photos and then overlap them perfectly, which will make it a lot easier when we're trying to brush stuff in from one photo to another. Because the idea is to get this photo, but with the dials on. So there we go. Now we're lined up. Looks good. So the top photo has the dials off. We will add the mask and then take the brush when it's black and just brush it back in. And there we go. It's that simple. 2 photos, one where the car is lit the way I want it and one where the gauges are lit the way I want it. And we just combine them. Pretty simple, although it is slightly off-colored in the parts where there isn't light. So let's avoid that. And then we'll just brush in these gauges. And there we go. Now we have an interior photo where it makes sense. Hit Command S. See, in person, it's impossible to get that photo because my lights are going to be a lot brighter. It's not impossible, but it's hard because I want to shoot with the color of my lights without using gels. And the color of my lights are daylight, and the color of the background is not. It's too warm. But the lights, the dials on the car are too weak to compete with my lights. So if I want to control the lights, I have to shoot it and overpower the dials because I can't turn off the lights from within the workshop. It's just not possible to control the lighting around. So I'll take 2 photos, one where I've exposed the car better and one where I've exposed the dials better. Same kind of mentality as with the first photo that we showed, where you expose the car better and then you expose the background better. And then you combine the 2. So there we go. Now we crop out the excess. Don't need that. And then now we have a shot where everything is in focus. I don't like what was on the screen in the other shot. I think it was some sort of like, welcome to the party sign. If I had more time, I would have put like a map up or something. But for now, this is what we're going to use. There's a little bit of purple maybe in the steering wheel. Perhaps it's magenta. Yep, there we go. So we even that out. And then let's just copy paste our editing. It's too much, too red. But let's just do a quick edit on this one. Just gonna level everything out. I'm gonna take away the yellows because I don't want the background to be yellow. Or Maybe the background is orange. It is, but it messes too much with the car's paint. So let's hit the brush, desaturate, and then we'll just brush out the background manually. There we go. Now it's not such an issue. I also want it to be darker, just so there's more focus on the car. Bring out some of the details. Add some more punch into the photo with the dehaze. I don't think there's too much more. If there's any blue in the photo, I want to get rid of it. There is blue in the daylight reflecting off the aluminum. And then add a bit of vignetting, save the highlights, feather, push in the midpoint. And I think that's a pretty clean photo. I think that's okay. So before, after. Well, the real before is this one. And then this. There we go. So now we have a handful of good photos from the session that I think we're pretty pumped about. Let's go back to the final version of this photo. And with that, my hour is up. That's pretty easy. I'm going to go back to full frame and I'm going to chat to you guys real quick for a second. Thank you for joining. Happy to have you here. My microphone isn't, but I'm pumped to be here. I had a good time. I had a lot of fun. You guys killed it in the chat. Thank you for joining. Thank you for hitting me up. I'm on Instagram. You know where to find me. Same way to spell as it's spelled down here. Send me a message. I want to see what you guys are up to. If you have photos of your own, you have car photos of your own, you want to show me. If you're editing alongside me, I want to see what you guys are doing. So send it my way. Tell me what's good. And that's what's good with me. Once again, this photo was shot on the Sony A1. It is a monster. It is a beast. It was shot with the 16-35. Oop, come on, focus. Shot with the 16-35 f2.8 G Master. Monster. I love this camera. I can't wait for you guys to start getting your hands on this camera because it's a beast. Yes, and with that, I am out of here. I don't know how to end this. Thomas, I guess, is in charge of that. But I will hit stop stream from my end. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. See you later.